What do you do when no one is watching? When the pressure is subtle, but constant? When giving in seems comfortable, even logical? Who are you? In the silence of small choices, true strength doesn't shout. It refuses with serenity. Discipline is rarely applauded, but it's always observed by destiny. In this video, we'll dive into an ancient story, one that echoes like a firm whisper in the hearts of those seeking self-mastery. Daniel's refusal of the king's food wasn't just a dietary choice, it was a Stoic act of inner freedom. Stay until the end and subscribe. If you feel you're searching for something deeper than motivation, something quieter, like applied wisdom. Today, we'll uncover the Stoic message behind the rejection of the king's food. Jerusalem had fallen, not just its walls, but the dignity of a people who watched with weary eyes as their traditions were trampled underfoot. By conquest, everything sacred was undone in the eyes of the empire. Temples plundered, names forgotten. The past of an entire nation was now dust beneath Babylonian sandals, but not all of the temple was destroyed. Some still stood silent within, men who refused to bend. Daniel was one of them, young, educated, of noble blood, a symbol of the hope that remained even in captivity. He and his 3 companions were taken into the palace's elite. They were given education, fine robes, prestige, special training. The empire wanted to mold them, not to destroy who they were, but to replace it. Subtly, they changed their names, they changed their language, they tried to change their identity. But there was one thing they couldn't take: their conscience. It's curious how control rarely comes shouting. Sometimes it arrives as an invitation, a beautiful plate, a welcoming gesture, a "you deserve this." And the most dangerous, it comes disguised as kindness. The king's food was a symbol, a poisoned gift of acceptance. Eating it meant belonging. It meant letting go of the last thread still tying him to who he was, because that food had been consecrated to the gods of Babylon. Accepting it would be like accepting surrender disguised as courtesy. And so, Daniel refused, not out of pride, not to provoke, but because something inside him said, "If I lose this, I lose myself entirely." That is silent courage, the kind that needs no audience, the kind that can only be measured in the places where no one is watching. Daniel didn't argue, he didn't stomp his feet. He asked, with humility, but with firmness, that he and his companions be given only vegetables and water. For 10 days, after that, they could be compared to the others. Do you see? This wasn't a war, it was a test, not a revolution. It was discipline. This is the battlefield of wise men, mastery of self, rather than mastery over others. The official hesitated. He was afraid. Afraid of the king, afraid of the consequences. What if Daniel appeared pale? What if his face betrayed his refusal? But the request was reasonable. It was accepted, and so began the quietest experiment in biblical history. 10 days. 10 days eating what seemed like less, rejecting what seemed like more. 10 days of discipline hidden behind simplicity. While others indulged in royal wine, Daniel delved into himself. Imagine the nights. The stares of others. The whisper of doubt. Why all this? Isn't it just food? But Daniel knew it wasn't about food. It was about conscience, about direction, about freedom. This is the nature of true self-discipline, invisible to the world's eyes, but scandalously alive within those who practice it. The days passed, the test ended, and the result was undeniable. Daniel and his friends were healthier, stronger, sharper. There was something in them no one could name, but everyone noticed. It was as if renunciation had produced radiance, as if faithfulness to one's soul left visible marks on the skin, the gaze, the posture. And there, in the heart of the palace that tried to assimilate them, they didn't just survive, they influenced. Daniel didn't conquer Babylon with weapons, but with consistency, with silent firmness, with the courage to remain faithful when everything called him to adapt. He refused excess, refused the easier path, refused the banquet, to keep the altar inside him burning. How many would do that? How many would sit at the king's table and still remain pure within? This is the paradox of the wise. They refuse not out of scorn, but because they've already found something more valuable than what's offered. What Daniel protected wasn't just his diet, it was his direction. And in that gesture, in that calm and firm no, echoes the entire philosophy of self-mastery. True victory isn't in conquering the world, but in not letting the world conquer you. It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Epictetus Daniel did not raise his voice against Babylon. He did not confront soldiers. He did not write fiery speeches. He simply maintained what Epictetus would call the hegemony over his own mind. Babylon offered comfort, and Daniel saw a trap. It offered privileges, and he saw compromise. Where others saw opportunity, he saw a test, and where many would have mindlessly yielded, Daniel chose to observe, to breathe, to say no. Silently. It wasn't contempt, it wasn't pride, it was clarity. It was the refined understanding that true freedom isn't about doing what you want, but remaining faithful to what you know is right, even if the price is discomfort or misunderstanding. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Seneca would call this radical integrity. Daniel was in harmony, outwardly exiled, inwardly free. While many would be ruled by the anxiety of fitting in, he chose wholeness. He did not hate Babylon. He simply refused to lose himself to please it. This serenity of action is what Stoicism values as virtue, not reactivity, but lucidity, not the glory of loud resistance, but the quiet strength of self-control. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote in Meditations, "If it is in your control, take command, the rest, accept with dignity." Daniel did not control the empire, the exile, the decrees, or the menu, but he controlled himself, his choice, his response, his yes and his no, and that was enough. This distinction between what is and isn't within our power is central to Stoic philosophy. Epictetus reminds us again, some things are up to us, others are not. Daniel lived as one who knew this. He did not try to change Babylon. He simply refused to be changed by it. This is what Seneca would call strength in renunciation, a strength that doesn't seek to forcefully confront the world, but to reform oneself from within day after day, choice after choice. The first and greatest battlefield is within. Ecclesiastes echoes, "Better a patient person than a warrior. One who controls their spirit is greater than one who conquers a city." Daniel was that kind of warrior. He wielded no swords. He wielded self-mastery. His refusal of the king's food was a small gesture, almost invisible, yet of immense symbolic weight. It wasn't merely a dietary choice. It was an inner manifesto, a wordless declaration. I know who I am, and nothing, not even the king's gold, can buy that. This is the virtue of resistance, not of pride, but of maturity. The maturity of one who has realized that true greatness lies, not in conquering others, but in conquering oneself, every day, in silence. And you, are you facing your own king's banquet? It may not be a table laden with wine and delicacies, but perhaps it's that job you accepted with a high salary, yet one that demands you silence parts of yourself, or that relationship where you feign peace, but swallow your truth daily to keep up appearances. It might even be that small, repeated habit, seemingly harmless, that slowly pulls you away from the person you know you could be. Sometimes, what weakens you isn't what you fight, but what you accept. What you allow. What you consume without question. Have you ever stopped to notice how many of your daily decisions are guided by convenience rather than conscience? How often do you adapt too much and lose yourself in the process? Daniel confronts us with something few dare to face. Freedom demands renunciation. Self-control isn't punishment. It's applied wisdom, and that's where the real question emerges. Who has offered you a beautiful plate that you haven't yet had the courage to refuse? Think. Maybe you're in a workplace where recognition comes, but at the cost of your peace. Maybe you're in a cycle of habits where everything seems under control, yet you're slowly losing the light in your eyes. Or perhaps you're silent, not out of serenity, but out of fear. In that case, is this unsettling silence your preparation? Is what you call loss actually the path to your liberation? The truth is, not all comfort is a blessing, and not all refusal is deprivation. Sometimes, what saves you is precisely what you had, the strength to deny. Daniel refused a plate everyone else would have accepted with gratitude, but he did it because he saw beyond the surface. He knew keeping his integrity was worth more than pleasing an empire. And you, are you trading your integrity for convenience? Are you bargaining your essence for crumbs of validation? The most dangerous prison isn't the one that locks from the outside, it's the one we lock from within, when we choose to please the world and forget to please our own conscience. So today, the question isn't whether you have strength. The question is, do you have direction? because strength without direction is just noise, but direction with awareness is silent freedom. Remember, what you master does not master you, but what you tolerate for too long eventually shapes you. So perhaps now is the time to refuse something, not with anger, not with drama, but with serenity. The same serenity that made Daniel a free man even in exile, the same serenity that may be waiting for you on the other side of your next choice. Discipline is the language of the strong, but it doesn't shout, it doesn't force itself, it simply remains steady, firm, like a rock in the current. And refusal is often the first yes you say to yourself, a silent yes, yet powerful, a yes that declares, I know who I am, even when the world tries to tell me otherwise. Daniel didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't seeking applause or approval. He simply stayed true to what he knew, deep inside, was right, even if it was small, even if it was lonely, and that was enough, because true strength isn't in winning external battles. It lives in the consistency of those who navigate their days without abandoning themselves, of those who say no to what glitters on the outside, but corrodes within. The wise man doesn't choose the easiest path. He honors the path set before him, not out of pride, but out of awareness, because he knows cheap shortcuts cost dearly, and the price of wholeness is always less than the cost of living fragmented. If this story stirred something deep within you, if it rekindled the memory of who you were, or who you could still be, consider following this channel. Here, every narrative is a mirror, a whisper, a silent compass for those walking with an awakened heart. Because in the end, it's not about resisting the world, it's about not losing yourself within it. And sometimes, the most sacred journey a person can take is the one back to themselves.